I've noticed a lot of people don't celebrate their birthdays. They are trying to survive it. They're managing disappointment. And one of the things I've noticed when it comes to my own birthday or just people over the years is like, what does how a person experienced their birthday tell about the relationship that they have with themselves? What does it tell about their historical experiences around that time? And whether it's somebody who is avoiding the day, trying to lay low, somebody who is over planning, double booking, somebody who's over inviting, it's all doing the same thing, trying to avoid the hurt of not really being seen. So, is it your birthday or is it your burden day? Guys, welcome to the Bird Brain Podcast, where the goal is to rise above it all, stay elevated, create that infinity, and up your you. I'm your host, Isaiah. And if you guys are watching this, well, today is my birthday. Well, by the time you watch this, it's my birthday. And it's something that I have deeply explored and just examined, not just in myself, but also other people I've come in contact with, or just from a societal standpoint. How much our birthdays are directly correlated to our mental health. And especially in Western culture, I think when we look at birthdays, we look at getting older. In many cases, it's dread, right? It's disappointment, it's sadness, it's despair, it's feeling unfulfilled because we have these milestones or we have these expectations of what a birthday is supposed to be, what it should represent, what should have happened by a certain point, right? You're supposed to have the partner by a certain age. You're supposed to have that dream job. You're supposed to have the home. You're supposed to have this wild financial success. You're supposed to be happy. But what is happiness? It looks different for everybody. And I know for me, defining that for myself has been so crucial and so helpful because I understand that what life looks like for me and what it needs to be for me is very different than most people. And I'm cool with that. And I wanted to take you guys with me on a couple of journeys or little excursions that I decided to do for myself and for my birthday. Don't worry about him. He's cool. Brother with me. It's all good. But I don't think we realize how much our birthdays are actually tied to our mental health. Like we talk about it in a weird roundabout way, but we never fully address what correlation our birthday has to our mental health and how we feel about ourselves. Because at the end of the day, birthdays are not just another day on the calendar. It's an archive, right? It's historical evidence of life up until this point. It also reveals how do people feel about themselves. Birthdays don't just mark time. They also reveal something. There's something that people do on their birthdays that says a lot about how they feel about themselves, the relationship that they have with themselves. Yeah, I think there's something to say about birthdays at the end of the day when you turn a different age. We have milestones. We have good morning, things that are important to us. But what does it all mean? Like, what does it all represent? And I know for me, for so many years, is like, does it need to be an accomplishment or does it need to just be acceptance and appreciation for who I actually am, who you are. How do you take care of yourself? So this is one of those moments actually. Sometimes I don't think we actually understand what it is. I know for me, birthday season, there's always this thing I do where I have milestones, right? There's always something I need to accomplish. I think last year I made it a point to have, 2 years in a row, I made it a point to have written a book by my actual birthday. And for 2 years, I did that. And by the time I reached my birthday, I was like, all right, cool. I feel complete. But sometimes it's like, hey, what do you actually need? Like, what do you want? Versus what do you demand of yourself? A lot of us don't realize what we are doing. There are some people who really make it a point to just avoid the day and hide away or, make sure they disappear. I think something that I used to do was I would make sure I was working on my birthday, or I make sure I was doing something, or it was a very intimate space. I know there were a couple of years where there was this concept that I had where it's like, I'll make sure that I bake my own cake. And baking my own cake was symbolic for so many things, right? It's the most favorite part. You know, you blow out the candles and it's supposed to be the closing of the ceremony. What happens when you don't have the cake? What happens when the cake is done wrong? What happens when the person doesn't show up? You know? And I know for a couple of years for me, it was this point of making sure I baked my own cake. One, I like baking. So I was like, hey, cool, I'm down to do it. But two, I knew that if I made the cake, I could not be disappointed. You know, and it's so funny when we think about it in terms of what we are willing to do to make sure that we are not disappointed in life, to make sure that we are not let down, to make sure that we are not abandoned or rejected. And it was funny because I was reading this article years ago about why there are certain people who over-invite, right? They'll invite a bunch of people. They'll have this big birthday blowout, and they'll invite a ton of people. And a lot of the time, they don't even know these people. They don't know them personally, or they haven't talked to them in years. And I'm like, oh yeah, bring this person, bring this person. And I remember there was one person in particular, I knew him pretty well, and I saw his social circle. For the most part, he knew people, but he didn't really engage with a lot of people. But come his birthday, all these people I never seen or even heard of before. And when it came to the group picture, it was just full. And I was like, man, why are these people here? Who are these people? I've never heard of them. He's never talked about them to me. So who are they? And then I read this article that was talking about how there are certain people who will make it a point to over-invite, just so they don't feel alone. Because at least if I invite a bunch of people, if half of them don't show up, there's still a bunch of other people coming. And I don't necessarily have to know them. It's just a feeling of like, people are here for me, right? And when I've been talking to my clients about, you know, what they were doing for their birthdays, I have a lot of clients that are Aries. And I was like, oh, it's your birthday too? Let's go. What are we doing? You know, and it became this thing where they're like, oh yeah, you know, I'm gonna keep it low key. I'm not really gonna do much. Or, yeah, I don't know, just go to dinner. Or, yeah, maybe I'll work. You know, something very low key or something completely avoiding the day altogether. And then the question or the discussion became, well, why? And then it was, well, this birthday isn't really a milestone birthday. Like, what do you mean? Well, you know, I'm turning 22. I'm not turning 21. Or I'm dreading turning 25 or the big 40 or the 50, you know. And it became this thing where there were these implications of what each birthday was supposed to symbolize. Where should I be by now? How should I feel about myself? What do I have? What don't I have? You know, sometimes people didn't have a partner. It's like, well, the fact that I don't have a partner means that I don't have anything to celebrate. What do you mean? You are with you every day. You will be the longest relationship that you have. So why do you think it is not okay or appropriate to celebrate yourself? You know, I was spending time, shout out to Glow, I was spending time with her for my birthday recently, and we were talking, and one of the things she said that stuck with me, she's like, I can tell who is a good friend to themselves. I can always tell who has been a good friend to themselves. And that stuck with me, because a lot of times we don't realize what we are showing to the world or showcasing to the world about how we feel about ourselves. And especially when it comes to birthdays. Now, yes, there are granted some people who like to overperform, whereas like I need to have this big blowout so I can have the attention, I can have people remember me. Oh yeah, you remember that birthday bash? You remember that person, they had on this dress or this outfit, or they did this crazy thing. All right, I want to be remembered. Sometimes it's validation. But then if you look at people a little bit closely, like how do they feel about themselves? And something I had forced my clients to do, well, not forced, but I told them, I was like, hey, look, every day is an opportunity to appreciate yourself. And every year that you're older and you actually live to see it, that's something to be proud of, especially if it's been a hard year. See, a lot of times we count our lives in these highlight reels versus recognizing what has actually taken place for me to get to where I am now. What have I had to overcome? What have I battled in silence? Okay, what have I lost? What have I gained? There's so much to appreciate in a year. And to think that, oh, one year in particular needs to be the one that signifies everything else. Hey, what if every year is a blessing? You know, that's something I started doing for myself. And one of the things I told myself as I got older, there was one birthday in particular, and I said, hey, from this point on, I will no longer endure life, I'll enjoy it. And every year since then, there's been an opportunity to make sure that I am enjoying myself, right? That I am doing life to my standards, the way I want to do it. Making sure little Isaiah is having a good time, right? Because you only get one of you. And what we also need to realize is if you don't have the ability to just appreciate yourself and acknowledge who you are, and just really value that, how do you think somebody else is going to do it? We're the blueprint. So if you don't value yourself, what makes you think that somebody else is going to have the tools to value you more? And we also got to realize too, if somebody does come into our life and they want to appreciate us and they do value us, if we aren't doing that for ourselves already, we will dismiss, we will undervalue, we'll also disrespect somebody's willingness to show up and say, hey, you're doing a good job. You can't receive it. So a lot of times, as much as we say we want love, as much as we say we want to be cared for, as much as we say we want to be acknowledged, if we're not doing that for ourselves, anything else is just going to be noise, or we're going to be blind to it, or we'll sabotage it. So what I've noticed is people will do one of two things. They'll do whatever they need to make themselves feel full, or do whatever they need to make themselves feel very small. And what does being small look like? Well, it looks like avoiding it. It looks like going quiet. It looks like throwing your phone away, you know, the day of. And for what? People won't outright say it, but sometimes we wish that people have shown up. And when they haven't, well, what does that mean about me? See, sometimes we need to understand that, you know, people not showing up for you isn't always about you. You know, they have responsibility. Sometimes, yeah, people won't show up for you if you're the type of person that only thinks that it goes one way. If you're not the type of person that's showing up for others, celebrating them, supporting them, then when it comes time to be on the receiving end, you probably won't have much. And then there might be other people who are always willing to show up for everybody else and do the most and go the extra mile and overextend. And then when it comes time for them to be seen, well, it's vacancy. It's a ghost town. And that's also information too. Stop crossing oceans for people who won't jump a puddle for you. Okay? And it's okay to recognize that you will not be alone just because you stop showing up in lonely places. You'll be with yourself. And now you'll have more vacancy to bring in new relationships and healthy relationships that you actually want to be a part of, that you say you want. I've noticed that some people will say, yeah, I don't really celebrate my birthday. And that translates to, hey, up until this point, it's been hard for me to feel seen. It's been hard for me to feel cared for. Or I've been made to feel like my birthday was a problem, right? Or I was a problem. It was hard to celebrate me and show up for me. So I've learned, and I've just, you know, created a habit of doing the same thing that everybody else has. I don't show up for me. And as much as we get used to certain routines, it doesn't mean that our internal space feels okay about it. Sometimes people fear being forgotten. You know, sometimes people fear disappointment. Sometimes people, you know, have certain expectations and the reality doesn't match that. You know, I've definitely had birthdays where I may have expected more. Then I've had other birthdays where I just pulled back entirely. You know, and I had to learn to find the middleman. For me, I think every birthday was a milestone opportunity. It was like, hey, what do I want to do to make sure that I feel good about this birthday? And for the past couple of years, I made sure that by my birthday, I'd have a new book written. And I did that. Right? And it was an accomplishment. It was cool. It was something to be proud of. But if I really look back at what I was doing, it was like, hey, you were giving yourself more work to be rewarded. When in actuality, you didn't have to do anything. You were good. You were good up until this point, right? Sometimes you got to remind yourself, hey, do I actually value who I am, or do I always need something tethered to me to make sure that I'm enough? And what is that thing? Who are those things? Like, what are those people? Who do I need to tell me that I'm enough to be celebrated first? And yes, there are certain people on their birthdays, they demand that other people show up, right? They have these big bashes. They expect people to travel and spend a bunch of money for them. And it's more of a demand or expectation. You're not a real friend if you don't do this for me, right? And depending on who it is, depending on the relationship, sometimes it's not even a friendship anymore. It's like, hey, you guys are props in my life. I'm the main character and I expect to be treated like such, you know? A birthday isn't the day to be obnoxious. It's just simply a day to be observed. And if you feel like you're too much in certain spaces, well, ask yourself, am I doing too much in these spaces? Okay. It's important to ask yourself, like, what does it look like for me to be celebrated? How do I feel about that? How do I celebrate others? All right, I'm the type of person, I make it a point to remember people's birthdays. And I make it a point to remind them that, hey, you are worth being celebrated. Not just today, but every day moving forward and the days beforehand. And sometimes that's all we need, you know, recognition that, hey, this isn't the only day you were going to be seen or valued. And sometimes that is scary because it's like, well, after this day, what happens now? I go back to life as it was. The novelty wears off. Well, that's why it's important to stay consistent in terms of how do you value yourself, right? And it's not making little effort in life. But a lot of times it's the people who have made so much effort in life who think that, you know, just being seen is a little bit too vulnerable or too much. So your birthday isn't just a celebration, it's also a mirror. And sometimes you deserve to take a good look at who you are and who you have chosen to be, because every day is a genuine opportunity to be whoever we want to be. And if you choose to show up, you know, you choose to do things differently, you choose to improve not just your life, but other people around you, that's worth celebrating. I know for me, I always say so much can change in a year. So much has changed for me in a year. So much has changed for me in a year. So much has changed for me in 2 years. And the fact that I'm still here, the fact that I'm only getting better, you know, the fact that I'm only feeling better, is something to celebrate. And sometimes you got to ask yourself, if this is as far as things go, you know, in terms of success, in terms of relationships, would I be content? Why or why not? If you don't celebrate your existence, nothing you do throughout the duration will matter. I promise you. Okay? So if it's your birthday coming up, if you had a birthday, just think about what it means, you know? Think about what is worth being grateful for. Versus grieving this idea that, hey, I'm not enough, or, you know, I didn't do what I was supposed to do by this time, or the people I thought would be there are no longer in my life. What do you have? Right? And if life is really bad, ask yourself, what am I willing to do differently to have a different outcome? I've learned so much about myself as I've gotten older. And, you know, I think about little Isaiah and I'm like, man, pretty interesting dude. You know, if I look back at, you know, who the little version of me was and how we got to here, it's required that little human to be exactly who he is, you know, to roll with the punches, to get through life, to have so many moments where he had a choice. And here we are. And the more you keep choosing yourself in the best way possible, the more you understand how important it is to celebrate yourself. And if you can't celebrate yourself, you will definitely not be able to celebrate anybody else properly. I promise you. A lot of times people think that they are loving others in such a healthy way, but if you don't love yourself, if you don't practice that, you are not giving people the most genuine, healthy, and authentic love. And eventually it will show. Okay? So, if you have a birthday coming up and you don't have any plans, plan to be grateful. Okay? Plan to blow out some candles. Bake your own damn cake if you have to. Okay? But make sure you celebrate something of who you are and how far you've come, because it's worth it. And it's a disservice to think that other people will be able to celebrate you properly first if you don't know what it takes to show up for yourself. So, this year, this birthday wish, I think my friend, she asked, what do you expect to come out of this birthday of this year? And I said, honestly, peace. And so far I have it. I've created it, right? I've cultivated it. I've nurtured it. And let's understand, sometimes peace requires chaos to exist, right? There needs to be disruptions. It's not passive. Peace is not passive. Right? It requires you to persevere. It requires you to have a healthier perspective. It requires you to be persistent. It also requires you to push through. And sometimes it requires you to pause. All right? So, take care of yourselves. Take inventory. Take care of each other. And take a moment before you blow out your candle and just say thank you. That's what I'll be doing. Take flight.